Wonderful day, wonderful day, wonderful day to you all. This right here is your neighborhood sensei Fouché, and I always begin my shows by first strongly suggesting, before emphatically imploring, for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals to stay woke, but in the process, never get all stressed out, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you take all necessary practices and procedures, including environmental change, when and if necessary, to relax. And always, 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 always be prepared to take those notes. I must say, I am really excited for this moment. This is the first show that I have recorded in a little bit less than 5 months. And my apologies to all followers who had questions in their mind about whether I was going to continue on or whether it was just, a short existence. My apologies, you know what I'm saying? But I'm back. And I will explain my time off in a soon to be future episode coming up on the Chop It Up version that I deliver. And in the opening monologue, I was mentioning about environmental change. And that's pretty much the short of what I was transitioning through is, leaving a situation and creating a new situation that was more complementary to my residential preference as far as how I choose to live and the boundaries that I create. You know what I'm saying? And all of this, I speak, to all of the followers, whoever's following the show. Like, this is what my whole thing is about. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to get into this further past this short in the introduction at another time, like I was saying. You know what I'm saying? Because I go through these things no different than anybody else. Trust me, I don't think that I'm a know-it-all. I am wise because of my experiences as well as the education that I added behind it. Like, I had the whole, book knowledge to a certain extent as far as, your generic grade school experience. I was a pretty astute young gentleman, when I was in my youngest years. You know what I'm saying? And that was, all of your generic learning, within the grade school system. Then I learned how to become a whole lot more street intelligent, you know what I'm saying? And that carried a great degree of difficulty and stress along the way. All of which I was definitely not prepared to handle maturely because I was still in a very insecure and immature processing in those times. And in my most recent years, especially since I touched down over in Rapid City, South Dakota, it's been a whole nother evolution of understanding and learning, you know what I'm saying, and really digging into the deepest aspect, references, and analogies to mental health. And that has really elevated my connectedness into this interrelatable world. You know what I'm saying? Because I really was uncomfortable with the term, or even knew to define the term interdependence. I was thinking on this isolated, independent mind state, and that was continuing to fall short. dependency has you falling short to a greater degree in a different direction, you know what I'm saying? But it's still, minimal or limited state of being. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just sharing what I feel through my education and experiences. You know what I'm saying? And this whole video experience for me is another growing addition to who I am. You know what I'm saying? Anybody that knows me, I'm not, really a front stage person at all. Back in the days when, I had my whole hip hop crew, and me being, the Black Lion, the head, being the producer and the organizer, once other artists were introduced and aligned underneath my camp, I was trying to push them out first. Like, I just wanted to be more like the RZA, as an example of the Wu-Tang Clan, for anybody familiar with the history of that group. You know what I'm saying? Like, I looked at myself like RZA. Like, I wanted to pump all my artists and just be the hit music orchestrator, or conductor, composer. Like, that was my whole thing. I wanted to be more known as one of the elite behind the scenes producers. You know what I'm saying? And for me, it was about being an elite lyricist, as far as an extended vocabulary. Not trying to, dummy it down, for the popular mainstream. But anyway, back to what we have going on in this moment now is this wonderful novel that I was covering from before, and then, we had this break. Control Your Mind and Master Your Feelings by Eric Robertson is the book that we've been covering. And I didn't forget how to go through this and to pick up where we left off before. And we're getting into chapter 3 into this reading. And chapter 3, from overthinking to social anxiety. And I know I started covering that in the opening monologue when I was describing, my evolution and coming to this camera aspect of delivering information. Because I wouldn't figure for myself to be very camera friendly, or, to be comfortable being videoed, and especially, videoing myself, because my subconscious takes play all the time. Like, are you coming across clear? The mistakes. If I make mistakes just in general, I might just stop the video and go all the way to the beginning and not allow for those mistakes to move through. Almost like a perfectionist type of thinking or hopefulness, you know what I'm saying? And if it's not like just right, it's like, man, now I have to do it all over. And one thing I was thinking of yesterday in my preparation into this moment was, can you live beyond the at moment mistakes? And my goal and aim is to be most clear and relatable when it comes to sharing with all of the chosen followers that are tuned into, what I'm dropping. So, my own insecurities, how does that play out socially? And I was starting to explain that before too, because socially, I was very uncomfortable. If I was amongst my closest inner circle, I can relate, very well. You know what I'm saying? Let me not even try to misstate, because even in those moments you're almost playing a character, because if I was really my true self, would these people still want to be around me? You know what I'm saying? But when you're around a certain group of people that you're used to being around, when you're within, a certain character, then, you'll deliver your performance, to call it that. You know what I'm saying? But when you are in uncomfortable environments or things that you're unfamiliar with, like, how do you deal with that? And that's what this is about to cover within this chapter, I'm sure. You know what I'm saying? I always say that anyone that knows me, I was in a kitchen, being a culinary artist, cook, chef, whichever label you want to specifically give it, but just basically in general conversation, a cook. I knew what I was doing when I chose that profession. In my first career, the first thing I was doing from a job perspective was more personal. I didn't have to be, overly social. And that started off really with, stocking shelves as, a young stock clerk. My dad worked in the supermarket game for a long time, so, that was my first experience, and that was being out in the general public, but you didn't necessarily interact too much with them, you know what I'm saying? Or I didn't. And I was so awkward that I probably would point to someone else to try to help you if you did. You know what I'm saying? I'm like 14, 15 years old, and I wasn't in my bag at all. You know what I'm saying? Then when I get into the first official job that I wound up finding for myself, it was a kitchen job. And I was behind the scenes as opposed to, front of the house as a host or, a waiter. And then I continued further into that when I moved from New York City to Atlanta. When I was still in New York City, I was experiencing a lot of moments in my career where my job required for me to be more in the social scene, and that was uncomfortable. So when I got to Atlanta, I spent the next 23 years for sure stuck inside of a kitchen. If I was able to be there without having to do some kind of action station of some sort when I was in Atlanta, but for the most part, staying behind the scenes, that was my bag. And in these days, being able to be diverse in different type of environments, regardless of comfortability, is something that I've been working on. And I'm grabbing some water. And that I was accepting as a challenge to try to fulfill my completeness. But going past this opening monologue, let's start to get into our reading. And again, this is chapter 3, titled From Overthinking to Social Anxiety. Again, the book that we're reading from, Control Your Mind and Master Your Feelings by Eric Robertson. All right. Anxiety is a feeling of nervousness, being on edge, and constant worry about things we can't control. Anxiety is instinctive with the fact that our cortisol hormones raise when we feel we are in danger. Basically you get all pumped up and, your reaction starts to intensify. However, most anxiety attacks, again, let me read that over. However, most anxiety attacks are not happening because you are in actual danger, but because the brain interprets you as being in danger. I mean, basically, you telling yourself or convincing yourself of feeling something, even though it probably isn't true. Or the other party, their intent is not for that feeling to transpire within you, but you wound up letting it happen. Anxiety can be closely related to and stem from depression and vice versa. And I'm not going to go further into that, but I mean, I could ad-lib all day because I know this back and front from my personal experiences. I'm extremely relatable to this information, except now I'm honest about it. And that's what makes it most able to embrace and share and discuss without any shame. This is because the hormones that our brain produces are almost identical to the hormones resulting from anxiety and depression, meaning the two disorders cause the same hormone releases, such as cortisol surges. The types of anxiety disorders are: 1. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And these are terms that, we commonly use, and don't let me get into a conversation about trauma disorder. Let me just continue to read. Number 2 is obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. 3rd, generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. 4, social anxiety disorder, SAD. 5, panic disorder. And 6 is agoraphobia. And we're going to itemize all of these things when we move forward. Social anxiety disorder. Social media and addictions to technology are two main causes of having a social anxiety disorder. The main reason why people have a social anxiety disorder is because they are usually in their head overthinking about what others think about them. And it's easy to hide behind words and your own computer desk and get into your feelings, in that aspect of social sharing. All right, now I'm reading because I didn't look at the pages for a moment. We often hide behind social media because it's easier to have a conversation through text message rather than in person. Oh man, I'm telling you, I definitely vibe this whole thing. I laugh because it's like, I go into my ad libs and then I'm reading behind it like, man, this is right on the money. You can't skip a beat. With how generations are developing, social media is becoming the main way to communicate. More or less interpersonal interactions and more impersonal interactions is becoming more common. And that wasn't read from the book. That was my ad-lib. So again, with how generations are developing, social media is becoming the main way to communicate, which causes addictions and is not healthy by any means. Many people experience, we're explaining social anxiety disorder. Many people experience feeling shy or nervous in a social setting. But after some time, their nerves die down and they become socially interactive. Others may be complete social butterflies, but become overly afraid when it comes to having to give a presentation or speech in front of a large crowd. And that was me before. I have a story that I'm not going to tell right now about speech class when I was in high school and how afraid I was. And maybe I will go into it shortly. Let me make sure I keep my place with my finger. So in high school, I had to take speech class. I started off in the honors program and then got myself kicked out because I was not socially comfortable learning along with those students. Like, I felt out of place. So I wound up dropping the level into the business division. And I had to take speech class. And the speech was accounted for 70% of the grade. And I had to, you had to give the speech at the end of the semester. The whole semester you were preparing, to give this speech. And I was so nervous and felt so awkward. And if I'm correct, I wound up going 5th. And this is a class of maybe like 18 kids, if I'm right, give or take. It wasn't an extremely large class, for a New York City classroom. But, I thought I sounded foolish. I thought I was going to be mocked, laughed at. And when class finished, my fellow students came up to me and commended me and told me that they felt the same way that I did. And here I am sweating bullets, got these big circles under my armpits. And for what? For everyone else to feel the same way and then commend me and then wind up telling me that they felt as awkward about themselves as I did about myself. This is normal if you could get through it. However, someone who experiences social anxiety disorder feels distressed in these situations and may go to great lengths to avoid social interaction and contact because it makes them feel really uncomfortable. Social anxiety is also known as social phobia and is the most common of the anxiety disorders listed above. Check out the following list to see if your shyness goes beyond normal and if you could be developing a social anxiety disorder. 1. Talking to strangers and meeting new people. 2. Public speaking or speaking in front of a group of people. Like I said, I just covered this in my personal experience. I know all of this. That's why I'm sharing it with all of you. So I'm definitely not attention seeking. 3. Dating and relationship conflict. Another form of confrontation. All these are underneath some form of confrontation. And that's one thing I always state is most people are afraid of confrontation. And confrontation isn't a bad thing. It just depends on what you're trying to get out of it. But it's necessary. 4. Making and maintaining eye contact. You know what I'm saying? Can you look someone eye to eye, or you diverting your focus into other areas, and usually that's a guilty conscience. Entering. My 6. That's 6. Entering and exiting rooms with new people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's number 5. Entering and exiting rooms with new people. 6. Using public restrooms. Germophobia. 7. Going to social events such as parties and business meetings. I covered all of these things. 8. Eating in front of others. 9. Going to work, school, or college. 10. Starting conversations and finishing them. There are many reasons why, I was in between a burp, so pardon me. Let me start the sentence over. There are many reasons why a socially anxious person may feel fearful of some of the above situations, but in most cases, the reasons are pretty general. Someone may be fearful of being judged or humiliated in a social setting. Others may obsess about it if they say or do something to upset or offend someone else. Another reason for being socially afraid is because they want to avoid being the center of attention at all costs because they overthink every situation that they are in. This is where overthinking causes social anxiety, and most times you just need to get out of your head and into the present moment. Here is a list of just some of the symptoms a person suffering from a social anxiety disorder may experience. 1. A fast heart rate. 2. Is tense muscles. 3. Dizziness and feeling like you are about to pass out. 4. Digestive problems such as gut root and bowel issues. 5. Shortness of breath. 6. Feeling spacey or like you are not here, out of body. An out of body sensation as if you feel you are in a bubble or not inside of your body controlling yourself. If you let the disorder get the best of you, it can really take control of your life. You will start to avoid situations that involve people or any interactions for that matter. You may even develop an awkward sense of communication, which will make your symptoms even worse. When you avoid social situations, it will affect your interpersonal relationships and can lead to the following in this list: low self-esteem, negative thinking, depression, isolation, criticism sensitivity, my fault. I got a little bit squeaky. Social skills that don't improve or develop. Again, let's cover these symptoms again. When you avoid social situations, it will affect your interpersonal relationships and can lead to the following list of these. Again, 1. Low self-esteem. 2. Negative thinking. 3. Depression. 4. Isolation. 5. Criticism sensitivity. And 6. Social skills that don't improve or develop. A lame. You're a lame. Well, that's how you feel. That's how you feel about yourself. That's what I used to call or think about myself. I thought I was a lame. No matter how much other people thought about me outside of myself, people in my family they label me as cool. They thought of me as cool. I thought of myself as trying to be cool, and they thought of me as cool, but I never thought of myself as cool. I always thought of myself as trying to be cool, but they looked at me as cool. Tell you, everybody thinks they're on an island talking to the volleyball. You know what I'm saying? Generally, social anxiety disorder starts in early adolescence. This is all development from the early stages. That's why I stated, it's less about what's wrong with the kids and more about what's wrong with the adults. Because, what they're showing and teaching these kids, that's the problem. But they don't want to, have accountability, so they want to blame all these other things. You know what I'm saying? ADD, attention deficit disorder. That I very much dislike when the way that it's spoken or handled by people that use that as their crutch. Like, there is no cure. I have ADD, and because I have ADD, then there's nothing that can be done. I am broken and I can't be fixed. I'm like bologna with some added cheese and mayo. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm trying to get right down to the mustard and, the authentic meat. I ain't trying to have like a mix of junk, which is what they be giving me, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even trying to hear it, because I was that dude. So you trying to convince me of something I already know, like, that's foolish. You know what I'm saying? But it's more about you trying to convince yourself than trying to convince me, because I know you don't. So let's go over our paragraph again, or I don't know if I went into it, but we're about to go into it again right now. Generally, social anxiety disorder starts in early adolescence and can be linked to bullying, teasing, or a history of abuse. Children with controlling or narcissistic parents may develop a shyness in social settings, which may develop into adulthood. Another link to a social anxiety disorder, or any anxiety disorder for that matter, is that the amygdala could be overactive, stimulating the limbic system to crash. The best way to overcome social anxiety is to act against your urges to isolate and withdraw from people. It's that easy and hard at the same time. You have to force yourself out of your insecurity. And most people aren't going to do that because most of us were comfortable with complacement. Instead, engage with one person and gradually get comfortable doing more. Baby steps, one at a time. And talking to new people. This is called exposure therapy and will help you cope with and understand yourself when introduced to the social world. Social media addictions. Something that most people don't realize that is happening is when someone develops a social anxiety disorder, they avoid social interaction and they become a social media expert. Yeah, right. But this expertise can branch into an addiction to social media really quickly, which becomes very unhealthy for your mental health. For example, do you get anxious when your phone dies and don't have a computer or Wi-Fi around to check your social media accounts? Can you put your phone down for 15 minutes? A half hour, I couldn't even ask that much of anyone, most people, for an hour. You know what I'm saying? Can you do a day? Let's go back to 15 minutes, because I start saying a day, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are panicking right now. You know what I'm saying? Do you freak out or lose control when you can't view your messages or see what your friends or other people are up to? You know what I'm saying? And that's impulsiveness, a high level of it. Does it feel like the end of the world if you forgot your passwords? Can't get in it quick enough. Impulsiveness. This is actually called social media anxiety disorder. According to anxiety theorists and social media developers, 20% of people with social media accounts get anxious or become fearful if they go more than 3 hours without checking their social feeds. I try not to be on my phone. A lot of people are finding it their point to be on their phone. It turns out that the more technology we obtain, the more stressed out and anxious we become. And that's going to be developing more into complacency. Sounds contradicting, right? Well, let me explain exactly what social media anxiety disorder is. We're going in. Similar to a social anxiety disorder, a social media anxiety disorder only happens if you become overwhelmed or develop an extreme sense of fear if you cannot check your account. For most people, this seems abnormal and they won't get stressed or even worry about their social accounts. However, the more technology and new products that get introduced into our society, the more chances there are at developing a social media anxiety disorder. That is why I say the more technology we have, the more stressed we are becoming. Some signs that you or someone you know may have a social media anxiety disorder are as follows. However, not everyone with this disorder experiences every symptom. Interrupting or tuning out conversations to check their social media accounts. Man, that was my ex that I just got out of that toxic relationship with that I'm going to talk about in a side conversation. All of this falls in line with her. If I'm to start reading through it, lying to yourself. This is number 2, lying to yourself and others about how much time is spent online. 3, withdrawal and isolation from people you care about or say that you care about. 4, trying to stop your social media influence more than once without having accomplished it fully. 5, neglecting work and other responsibilities due to constant check on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't cook, you can't clean, you can't do anything else but just have your fingers scrolling and texting through the social media experience. It is ugly. 6, experience severe anxiety when you cannot gain access to your accounts, any account. 7, an overwhelming urge to share things with the world and all your friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, you love the gossip. Spending more than 6 hours a day social networking. I mean, any part-time job covers 4 to 6 hour shifts, and that's close enough to a full-time job, 6 to 8 hour shifts. So that's basically another full-time job. Having your phone or technological tongue-tied for a minute. Having your phone or a technological device with you all the time only to check your social feeds or to have it in your mind that you can access it whenever you want. See, I had to feel comfortable with that mistake. That was something I was talking about in the opening introduction monologue. Spending too much time on the internet and checking your social media feeds and notifications can greatly impact the way you live your life. You may lose out on job opportunities, fail to resolve conflict in your interpersonal relationships. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, them folks about to be through with you because, you are isolating them for the convenience of social media interaction instead of interpersonal relationships or interactions. And your education may suffer. This is because the more hours you spend online, the less time you have to work on your career, yourself, your intimate relationships, your friends, and your study. There are many factors that play a part in social media addictions. It has been proven to cause eye strains, neck tension, and back problems. If anything, my problem personally is music composition. I'll sit in front of the computer and my drum pad for, a couple of hours, at least maybe 3-4 hours a day. You know what I'm saying? And that's my thing. And I'll get, eye strains, the neck tension, my back problems, extended post culinary career back problems. Then I get sitting in front of the computer too long, back problems in my, creative bag. Not generic dumb, because I'm not scrolling through social media at all. I'm over here placing and composing notes, on electronic sheets. If the length of time you spend on social media is not reduced, it can actually lead to obesity, heart disease, dietary problems, and increased risk of a stroke happening. That's not at all. Mental health issues such as anxiety can develop as well. Oh, let me read that over. That's not all. Mental health issues such as anxiety can develop as well. Other mental health issues caused by social media addiction include depression, attention hyperdeficit disorder, ADHD. Right? That's the term everybody uses. The attention hyperdeficit disorder. I have ADHD. Let's move on, because I already went through my rant with that. Impulsive disorder, loneliness, and even paranoia. And I mentioned ADHD because I knew it would be in here, And people always speak to me as if there's no hope. And I'm like, you just don't want there to be any hope because you need the crutch. But I'm like, I call bologna with cheese all day. You know what I'm saying? With mayo. But we're going to get to the mustard and the real meat. You know what I'm saying? And we ain't talking about that processed cheese neither. The competition for perfection and the way you want others to view your life becomes addictive, which leads to overthinking and constant worry. For example, you may scroll through social media and live vicariously through someone else, seeing as they have children, are married, and have a great career. So you look at your life through the lens of someone else's experience, or you're hoping for someone else's experience for what you think is the perfect life. While your life seems depressing because things aren't as you want them to be, which is perfect, or how you think perfect is. However, what you must understand is no one's life is completely perfect, and as envious as you may feel, the grass may not always be greener on the other side. If you are trying to show this picture-perfect lifestyle, chances are someone else is doing quite the same. And I'll tell you in a minute, my life is not perfect at all. I'm just great at acknowledging and dealing with confrontation because, I'm not afraid to understand what is. When you look at the definition of addiction, it usually refers to someone acting on their urges, no matter the consequences, which normally leads to negative effects. The addiction becomes a harmful habit, and the person with the addiction does anything in their power to get their fix. And I know all of this language through, my personal dealings with alcohol and harder drugs. You know what I'm saying? So, I could have a seminar on that, and I could, like I said, I could relate to this information in so many different directions, and that's why I'm giving it to you. And that's why I'm so confident when I'm telling it to you, is because I have lived all of this in so many different ways. I collected the information, read it 3-4 times over, and then I'm paying it forward. So, when you combine these two definitions, you get someone who uses social media excessively without the will to reduce their habit or control their urges. It's almost as if the person cannot go an hour without having to check their online accounts. They become so involved with social media that they know everything about everyone and what's happening in theirs or someone else's world. The information provided is not to say that social media is a bad or unhealthy. However, social media use can become unhealthy when it is abused or overused, and this is when it becomes a problem. I had to pause for a second to make sure that there wasn't a type error, in the publishing of this book. The problem is not with the media sites or the actual individual. The problem is that these sites mask the opportunity to speak in person. When we don't communicate or interact face to face, a ton of information gets missed, which can cause miscommunication and more conflict. I say that all the time. Me personally, I prefer the most interpersonal interactions. I don't like, I always say, in short, if I'm texting conversations, I have to stop. I immediately stop. If someone starts going into paragraphs to have a conversation, I'll retract from continuing in that fashion. And someone on the other end might be like, what, you don't feel like talking? And I'm like, that's the problem. We're not talking. I don't like texting conversations. Texting is for notations, you know what I'm saying? But having conversations is a most interpersonal experience if you want to have that. or keep that. Feel it to the highest degree. I'm glad I paced myself because I kind of was searching for a specific word and couldn't find it. When you talk online, you do not get to see the opposing party's posture. There is no eye contact. Like you could misinterpret the true feeling by trying to overlook through the words that are being typed. So again, when you talk online, you do not get to see the opposing party's posture. There is no eye contact, and you will not hear their tone of voice or feel their vibes. We assume that someone is in a bad mood based solely on their choice of words and vice versa, when this may not always be the case, causing miscommunication, which again causes conflict. Finally, you guessed it, this causes the individual experience the misguided nonverbal interaction to overthink, then find problems that they cannot solve. The only real way to solve this type of issue is to be in person and have a conversation. If it's not too late by the time online networking has taken let me go over because I don't want to misstep the flow of this sentence. The only real way to solve this type of issue is to be in person and have a conversation. If it's not too late by the time online networking has taken control of the circumstance. The more we hide behind our devices and messages or show off, the more awkward face-to-face conversations will be, which will make more and more people avoid personal contact. This is because the only way we know how to talk is through our devices, and face-to-face interaction will become extremely difficult. Still not sure whether or not you have an addiction? Ask yourself these following questions to get a clearer sense of if you do or not. And these aren't going to state whether, you're not going to believe them or acknowledge them when I state them because, you have to deflect from honesty to continue to exist the way that you do, which is, your high anxiousness and confusion. Circle of trouble. So let's read off this list. 1. How much time do I spend on social media per day? Questions you should ask yourself. Again, when I am not on social media accounts, how much extra time do I spend thinking about my conversations and profiles? Have I had an urge in the last 12 hours to check my social media accounts? 4. Am I living envious of someone else and feeling the need to compete with them on social media sites? 5. Do I use social media to avoid or forget my real life problems? 6. Have I tried to reduce my social media access or time on it and gotten nowhere? 7. Am I anxious when I have been logged off of my accounts and cannot log back on? 8. Has social media changed or impacted my life in a negative way? If your answers were mostly yes, then you may have a social media addiction and should further investigate so that it doesn't become a disorder. Remember to take a break from social media and online accounts at least one day a week to avoid the addiction from escalating. And for anybody that believes in God, you just take one day. God had one day of rest. You know what I'm saying? So you should take one day of rest also. Instead of the constant struggle through anxiety by, your constant activity, which is counterproductive and disagreeable, into how you deal with others socially. Even though it might not be apparent at first sight, social media addiction can be indirectly linked to the habit of overthinking. That is why it can be essential in your fight against overthinking to learn how to keep excessive social media use in check. Technology addictions. Technology addictions are the same as social media addiction, except instead of being addicted to social media, you are addicted to your cool new gadgets and devices. And this is, probably attached to gamers. You spend hours upon hours gaming. And I used to be that guy when I was a young kid. You know what I'm saying? And I have a connectedness with that as well. But I'm not going to go into that story right now. Anything to do with technology you know about. You are emptying your wallet constantly to get the next best thing. It has become the norm for the adolescent to play video games in their rooms, the toddler to tinker on their tablets, or the adult to be zoned into their phones. Technology is everywhere, and it is used for many reasons, whether someone needs it for work and has 2 phones, or the entrepreneur needs the tablet to promote and manage their growing business. The up-and-coming authors spend hours typing away at their desk, and the music composers spend hours in front of their drum pad or their track system and continue to itemize through creation or creating. Here are some warning signs that technology can be a problem for you. And let me say this in short before I move forward towards the end of this chapter. When I talk to people that know me most intimately, and I tell them about my, music obsession, I always state and acknowledge that I get to a point to where I know that, I'm being overwhelmed by these redundant loops. And it's important for me to, continue to listen and itemize through the loop pattern. But it comes to a point where I'm like, I need a break. And I will grab my headphones and I will throw them off of my head and immediately get up and go to another room for about an hour and a half or whatever. And I might come back to the composition and just tinker just slightly, but I won't overwhelm myself again, you know what I'm saying, for a long period of time. Unless I start like maybe in the early part of the day, and then I'll take like a few hours off, and then I'll come back to it later and maybe put another, 2.5 hours in. I might put a couple of hours in at an earlier point and a couple of more a little bit later. But like I said, I'm extremely relatable, so it isn't like I'm some know-it-all and I don't, that doesn't empathize. Because trust me, I have a million stories that I don't have time to tell you in one episode of how relatable I am with all of this information, again, in a lot of different directions, not just one. So here are some warning signs that technology could be a problem for you. And we're almost finished with the end of this chapter. So let's go finish going through this. 1, always thinking about the internet or the next new item. 2, use the internet or your device to play games to satisfy your loneliness or depressive issues. That was 2 relationships ago. Always on playing these phone games instead of engaging and interacting with someone right next to you. Feel irritable, restless, or moody when you attempt to cut down on device time. Like you get frustrated soon after you put it down, so then you pick it right back up. 4, procrastinate work and other responsibilities by being on your devices. Always talking about what you can't do. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. But you have a whole lot of time to, go through your whole finger experience with your phone. Which is kind of weird, saying it like that, but it's true. And, watching the progression of it in front of your face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have an immediate urge to check your phone and messages instantly. 6. You have phantom vibration, which has you constantly checking your phone. So let's define phantom vibration because they have a definition for it. The perception that your mobile device is ringing or vibrating when it's not. You always grab it thinking that, you got a message or you heard something, but it wasn't there. Except 7, ignore what's happening around you because you are too distracted by your devices. 8, have feelings of anxiety when you are away from the internet. There is no such thing as real person interaction anymore, and the technology problem is getting out of hand. More and more parents are neglecting their parental responsibilities by handing their child a tablet or smartphone to distract their kids from asking for too much or annoying the parent. This results in behavioral problems and withdrawals when the device is taken away. I was telling my ex about this, but of course, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just read all of this information and just have a general awareness through observation, through deep observation. The main factor here is that tech designers and device developers use tricks to trigger dopamine hormones, that's the feel-good hormone, and manipulate our brains to get us addicted to our devices, which extends the usage for our screen time. Technology addiction leads to 1, anxiety and depression, 2, ADHD because it is used as a distraction, 3, sleep problems, 4, obesity, 5, eye problems, 6, damage of hearing. Researchers have found that most Americans look at their smartphones at least 52 to 80 times a day. The daily usage of screen time and device use is roughly 9 hours or more, which includes texting, gaming, social media scrolling, etc. It is time to start a digital detox, and only you are in control of how to go about this. You can do something about it. I'm tired of listening to these people use ADHD as their crutch. Well, my daughter has ADHD. I have ADHD. And because I have ADHD, then I can't do it. Nah, you choose not to do it. You know it has to be done, and then you don't want to do it, so then you choose to ignore it. But if you create a different pattern and you choose to be consciously aware and most observant and attentive into your duties and details, again, and into acknowledging that they exist and have to happen, then you should be able to go through the motion of having that experience, a different experience, take place. Because it's just creating different patterns and becoming comfortable in those patterns. The more uncomfortable you choose to be is a choice of you staying away from creating new patterns and continuing to exist in these cycles of old patterns that are destructive, not constructive, for your mental well-being. So I don't want to hear about what you can't do. I want to hear about what you can do. There are handicapped people don't like to be labeled as handicapped. They want to be able. They want to be known as being able. That's another reason why I can't give these people an out. Because when I run into people that have actual disabilities physically, they're born with these disabilities, like they fight in order to be able. And then you have these common people that make it their point to excuse themselves and validate why they can stay disabled. And I'm tired. I'll be tired of it, man. I'm tired. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, you trying to convince me? Matter of fact, I know you're not trying to convince me, because I know and you know that I'm not going to believe you. So it has to be that you have to convince yourself so that way you can validate you telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. When deep inside of you, you know that I do. But again, not to go further, too much further into an exit of a monologue, but we was just covering chapter 3 of this fantastic novel by Eric Robertson called Control Your Mind and Master Your Feelings. And like I said, we just came out of chapter 3, which was titled From Overthinking to Social Anxiety. And when we go into our next conversation, it is going to be chapter 4, of course, The Battle for the Cure. So they're going to just basically go through the solution for these problem-based people, you know what I'm saying, that continuously try to tell me and others, there's no cure, you know what I'm saying, there's nothing that can be done, it is what it is. And I'm like, it is what you choose for it to be. But this is going to be for our next discussion in our next moment. So it was a joy to be back in this practice of sharing. You see the new scene in the background, and that's because of, my different environment. So I have a different setup, and this is the setup that we have at our current moment, and, that's what's up. But, this experience I was looking to get back into, and it feels great. You know what I'm saying? I felt more fluent and fluid in my flow and delivery. I didn't want to have a lot of pauses and breaks, and being most comfortable into doing this is something that I enjoy continuing to practice. And it's good to know that I was able to, get back up on this thing like a bike and just get right back into pedaling, because when it's authentic, it's really not hard to be beyond the practice of it, being into the experience of it, So on that note, before I start getting stuck into parting words and kind of over speaking, let me state again that this is your neighborhood sensei Fouché, and I always end my shows the same way that I begin them. Begin them by strongly suggesting before emphatically imploring for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals to stay woke. But in the process, never get all stressed out, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you take all necessary practices and procedures, including environmental change when and if necessary. And trust me, I had to leave that darn circus that was created behind me, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking literally, I'm talking metaphorically from my before experience residentially. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, change in environment when necessary. And always be prepared to take those notes. Neighborhood Sensei Fouché, strongly suggesting before emphatically imploring for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals to stay woke, but in the process, never get all stressed out. Take all meditative practices and procedures, including environmental change, when and if necessary, to relax. And again, always be prepared to take those notes. Be smooth in unity. 1.